To set up 86 box, we need quite a few resources. You will find links down below in the description where you can download all of them. First up, we've got the 86 box emulator. Version 4.0.1 was the latest version when I produced the video. Optionally, you can download the 86 manager. This will let you manage several machines. I will just configure a single one, which is a Pentium II with a Voodoo 3 and a Sound Blaster 16. We need ROM files, the Windows 98 SE ISO file, chipset drivers for the Intel 440px chipset, Voodoo 3 graphics drivers, updated Sound Blaster 16 drivers, DirectX 7, and then we've got some benchmarks and some games. So let's get started. We go into 86 box, run 86 box, and we should be getting a message that the ROM files are missing. It's saying here, please download a ROM set and put them into ROMs directory. So here are the ROMs. We're just gonna copy that folder, put it into here, and then we will rename it into ROMs like that. And then 86 box should launch just fine. Here we go. And now we need to configure the machine. Tools, settings, change the machine type to slot 1. That's what we want to build. For the main board, I choose the AOpen AX6BC. I've been using this main board in many projects, so I'm really familiar with it. Pentium II, speed 450. Now with the speed, be warned, I'm using a Core i9 13th gen with DDR4 memory, but it's not fast enough to truly emulate that speed. Still, we're getting benefits with installing Windows nice and fast. And also I will show you how you can tell if your CPU is too weak for the emulation. For the RAM, 256 megabytes is heaps. Click on display and we're selecting for the graphics. We want a Voodoo 3, Voodoo 3 3000. Input devices, we need a mouse, standard PS2. For the sound card, let's go with the Sound Blaster 16 plug and play. Network and ports, we'll leave standard. Storage controller, change this to internal controller, and now we can configure hard disks, floppy drive and optical disk drives. So click on hard disks, new, and then we give it a name. Let's click on specify. There's already one here. It will override the settings, and then under type, there are some pre-built sizes available. Change that to custom large, and in terms of size, we're gonna go for 30,000. So that's 30 gigabytes should be plenty, and everything else we can leave at the default settings. For the speed, if you want a more authentic experience, you might want to slow it down to 7,200 RPM, but I leave it at RAM disk max speed. And then we get a warning that, remember, you need to format and partition that drive. Yes. Floppy disk, change this one to 1.4, and the second we don't need. And for the optical drive, click on this one, enabled, and then we just want to change this one so that it becomes a master device on the secondary IDE channel. And that's it. Press OK, save, restart. I think the machine will restart. There you go. Everything is looking good. Here we have the hard drive and the optical drive. And now we will configure the BIOS. Press F1 to continue or delete to setup. Let's press delete. So this is the BIOS. First, we're loading the turbo defaults, and that sets up most things. We don't need to change too much here. That's all looking good as well. Chipset features, again, nothing to change here. Let's go into power management. Also, this is all good. Plug and play, 2 changes. You need to use page up or page down to toggle these settings. Yes, we have a plug and play operating system, Windows 98 SE, and it should configure the resources automatically. And I believe that's it. One more change under integrated peripherals. I like disabling the serial and parallel ports. That frees up a few interrupts, which helps with DOS sound if that's something you're interested in. And we're almost done. I'm about to exit the BIOS, but before we do that, we need to mount our media, the Windows 98 SE image. So click on the CD-ROM drive, image, and then we navigate to our Windows 98 SE folder. There it is. Double click, it's mounted. Go back into the emulation, save and exit setup, yes, and it will now boot from the optical disk drive. Boot from CD-ROM, start Windows setup from the CD-ROM. Press enter, it will now partition the hard drive. Yes, we want large disk support, off it goes. It will need another reboot. So in terms of reboots, there will be many reboots every time we install a driver basically. So just get used to it. Boot from CD-ROM, start the Windows setup. And now it's formatting the drive. The drive is formatted. Press enter to continue. It will now perform some integrity checks on the drive, and then it will commence the installation. Continue. It's doing a few more checks and initializations. Yep, default directory. I'm going to go with the typical installation. If you want to change that, feel free to do so. Give it a good name. And off we go. And that's the first step done in the Windows 98 installation. Yes, you guessed it, we need another reboot. Now we choose booting from hard disk, put in a name, accept the license agreement, and then you need to enter the CD key. You can get it from the WinWorld website down below in the video description. And we click finish and the installation will continue. It will now set up the hardware, identify the plug and play devices and so on. And there we go, one more reboot. And another reboot. Okay, here it's looking for some monitor drivers. Just click next. There you go, so far so good. You could tell that the sound was stuttering. That is a clear sign that the machine we're trying to emulate is a little bit too much for our computer. Now we need to shut down the emulation and we need to copy these files inside of the emulator. And there are a couple of ways we can do this. On many machines you can just right click on the image file and mount it. But in my previous video covering PCM, that didn't work for many of you. So I'm showing you another way. Click on the Start button and type in Format. It's this utility here, Create and Format Hard Disk Partitions. It will load Disk Management and somewhere at the top, I think it's under Action, Attach VHD. And then you can browse for our image file. It's here, open and press OK. And now the drive, the virtual drive is basically mounted as D. And now it's really easy. I'm just gonna snap these side by side, go back here, select all the resources we need and copy them into that image file. And when we're done, we right click here and go detach to, remove it again. we go back to our emulator and launch 86box one more time. And a couple of tips here. With the Windows 98 SE installation disk, what we can do is we can copy the Windows 98 folder from the disk onto the hard drive, and then we can eject the media and use it to install games. And if you reconfigure the machine, changing the hardware, it might look for the Windows 98 disk, and then you just point it to the hard drive, making it easier. There you go, so that all copied over. Let me close these two windows, and now pressing the mouse wheel button, we can go to media and eject the disk. And now we don't need to interact with the emulator with the outside window anymore. We can go full screen, press Ctrl Alt page up, it will go to full screen. So drivers are next. Go to our C drive, the chipset drivers. There should be a setup file. Let's run that, and that will install the latest and greatest Intel chipset drivers, followed by a reboot. And now it's identifying all sorts of devices, so this process will take a few minutes. And another reboot. Next we go into the device manager, right click on my computer, properties, device manager. We want to activate DMA mode for the drive. This will lessen the load on the processor. Let's reboot. There we go. Next up are the graphics drivers. Voodoo 3, run the setup file. Next, I accept, next, next. Finish, another reboot. There you go, that's looking good. We have now more colors on the desktop. The Sound Blaster 16 update drivers are next. Run this file, it will unpack bunch of files, and then we run the update driver. This will give you a newer version of the VXD drivers, followed by another reboot. The finish line is near. We need the DirectX 7 package. And yes, one more reboot. We are ready to rock and roll, test some games. We've got some benchmarks, 3D Mark if you want to run them, make sure everything works. But let's go straight to some games. First up, we've got Screamer 4x4. This is the GOG release. There are 3 executables. This one has the Glide API to take advantage of our 3D fix, Voodoo. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Single player, but first let's go into the options. Video, let's play it 800 by 600. Crank up all those detail settings. Should be good to go. And then we go back, create a new team. Next, let's do the championship. Weekend, restart championship. That's fine. Choose this car, change the color, next, drive, off we go. Here we are in the game. Press F3 to zoom out a little bit, L to turn on the lights, and off we go. So yeah, the game seems to be running just fine. Performance is also not too bad. So looking good. Let's try a few more other games. Another game from GOG, Tomb Raider 2. Let's run the setup program. Go with 800 by 600. Everything else I think is fine to leave it default. Let's run the game. And there you go. Tomb Raider 2 seems to be running just fine. Game demos are also really good for testing. This is The Curse of Monkey Island. So this is a classic point and click adventure game. Haven't played this one in a while. Also seems to be running just fine. Another game that's working well. Let's try some Unreal, also with the 3dfx glide support, running at 800 by 600. Let's start a new game. Yeah, looking fine, looking good, just like on the real thing. The performance is so-so, definitely struggling. This game seems to be a bit more complex compared to some of the other games. It's doing an okay job, but we can definitely tell that it's struggling to emulate the clock frequency of 500 megahertz. It's a little bit too much. So I will later show you how you can reconfigure the machine. Actually, let's do it now. So we quit the game. Close this and shut down our emulation. Open 86 box, go to Tools, Settings, and then instead of 450, let's go with 300. See if you can handle that speed. We can see here 300 megahertz. So the Windows 98 startup sound, yeah, it was smooth, no stuttering this time. Let's see if it runs the game a little bit better. There we go, we are back in Unreal, now emulating a Pentium II running at 300 megahertz. It's still not a silky smooth 60 FPS locked experience. There are still some stutters and some sound glitches going on, but I would say it runs a little bit more consistent than before. And yeah, it's a really nice experience, you know, being able to configure the machine to your liking and installing Windows, playing around with the BIOS. It's really well done. And the slot 1 machine, look, it's just one system of many. There are so many machines and so many hardware options that this emulator supports. So it is really impressive that we can even do something like this. Unreal is probably a game that you can play fairly decently on a modern machine. There are DirectX 11 and DirectX 12 renders available that you can, you know, install into the game and then play it with really nice graphics, high resolutions on a modern computer. So it's probably not a game where you need 86 box to get the same experience. In fact, it will run much smoother and nicer looking on a modern machine. But for me, what I really like about this emulator is, the interaction with the machine, configuring everything and getting the same sort of feeling that you're getting with the real thing. And that wraps up this video. All the resources you'll find down below in the video description. It's quite a process at first, but remember, this is an emulator. So once you've got something configured, you can just make a copy of the image file, like a backup, so to speak, and then you can play around with the machine. And there are many games that you can try out on such a emulated Pentium 2. So yeah, I'm playing some more Unreal, and I hope you found this video interesting. Let me know your take on 86-box, PCM and emulation in general for Windows 98. I think we still have a fair bit to go, especially in terms of performance. It seems to be very difficult to emulate an x86 architecture with decent performance, which is really funny because in the console world, you know, they're already working on PlayStation 3 emulation. So, and we're struggling with a Pentium 2. So that's quite interesting, but it is what it is. So yeah, looking forward to hearing from you, your take on 86-box, your experiences, and that's it. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you soon with another one.